Hi everyone, Stephen here, and welcome to episode number 15 of You Are Admirable. Today our guest is Chris Cunningham. Chris is a singer-songwriter, musician, music producer. He's also a father, husband, and a friend. He's such a talented person. He's got great stories, and I'm excited to share this interview with all of you. Let's jump into it. Well, Chris, I have the opportunity to be interviewing now because my friend Kyle Sorensen nominated you as somebody he admires. And the things that he said is he admires you not only as a great singer-songwriter in creating unpretentious, very relatable music, but he also admires you as a person and specifically the life that you've made for yourself. So being able to live off of being a musician, off of writing music, off of producing music, off of performing, having a very nice family, having your own studio. And the question that he really had for you is that something that you envisioned for your life? And now that you're here, how do you feel about being where you're at?
Yeah, okay, wow. Well, first of all, that's so cool that he thought of me. That's neat. I mean, I'm touched. Yeah, and it's, I don't know, it's just kind of touching to get that perspective, you know, that feedback from the universe, so to speak, from somebody else's eyes. That's like, wow, cool. Because, you know, I can go along in my own tunnel vision and sort of not sort of count my blessings, you know, I can forget. But yeah, the vision for, you know, actually this house and this kind of lifestyle with running a recording studio business and being in a family, it all kind of came together pretty clearly in my late 20s, early 30s. You know, just kind of like a pretty rapid unfoldment. And yeah, so I'm not sure what the rest of the question, is. What do I feel about it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied with it now, too?
Yes and no. I mean, there's aspects that I would, you know, that are challenging, that I just sort of ongoing things I would like to tweak and believe I can over time. One of them just being more time for creating. You know, like I had all the time in the world in my 20s, you know, because in my 20s it was just full-time life on the road.
Yeah.
You know, and no, you know, spouse or anybody to be, you know, totally committed to and responsible to, and it's just like, you know, and the fulfillment part of being married and with, you know, and a parent way outweighs the, you know, the challenges. But there's definitely a whole different mindset that I didn't know was going to happen. Yeah. And it's not all about me anymore, and that's good, you know? I mean, and as time goes on, I actually find kind of some joy in that, too.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, I can enjoy watching someone else, like, grow, you know, and learn. I mean, our son's in a real rapid learning phase right now. Not that he hasn't been the whole time, but there's a lot of fulfillment in being a parent and a husband, and yeah, and the whole package. I mean, I still feel pretty optimistic overall about all of it, you know? Like, this has been 12 years now. I've been full-time running Basecamp, recording, and the fact that people continue to, you know, come back after, you know, repeat clients, that's pretty cool. And the kind of the level of feedback I get from people is, on average, really high. You know, they seem to appreciate, you know, their experience working with me. So yeah. So that keeps me satisfied for sure.
Nice.
You know, and Kyle mentioned that the unpretentious songs, that's kind of how I feel too about the producing. It sounds like such a glamorous word, but really it's a service word. I'm just here to try to help other people, you know, in however which ways occur to me, help them get, you know, do something magical with what they've got. And it doesn't have to be compared to anybody else, you know, just draw out the best in them and hopefully add to it.
Nice. Well, I think that definitely comes through. And Kyle himself mentioned, you know, through everything that you're doing with your family and with Base Camp, that you still have somehow remained a very humble and pleasant and just a good guy. He also said he's just a very cool guy.
That's great.
And I mean, I've read a bunch of quotes and testimonials about you too, and it seems to be like that's pretty much the consensus, that you're a very humble person who also cares a lot about getting the right product for people too, as far as producing their music. And I'm wondering specifically if humility and that kind of open-hearted caring, if you think that comes from somewhere in particular.
I mean, my kind of guess at that is, you know, I think it's just, I mean, it's probably from my upbringing, you know, to some extent, but, you know, I think it's probably more about my nature in a way. I mean, I feel like I'm, in general, a pretty, what do you call it? Like kind of harmonious, you know, sort of accepting person, non-judgmental, you know, for the most part, especially when it comes to, you know, interactions with, you know, people I'm sort of viewing as like it's my job to help them, other artists or musicians, or work with them. I tend to be, you know, pretty instinctually collaborative, you know. This isn't about me trying to, like, you know, whatever, make my mark using somebody else's stuff. That's more, you know, maybe what you find in other places or other sort of producers who maybe, you know, maybe have more of like a need for recognition or something, you know, like, gotta have my electric guitar sound on, you know, half of the tracks or something. But like that pursuit of sort of fame and recognition has never occurred to me much.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, it's like, I just want to feel inspiration, you know, that's kind of what drives me. It's like, you know, something feels good, or, you know, then I'll, like that was the same with me in the Story Hill careers, which is still going, but I mean, 30 years of doing, you know, quite a bit of music with another Bozemanite, you know, John Hermanson, or Johnny as I know him. You know, we were different a little bit in the sense that of the two of us, you know, I was just kind of like along for the ride in a way. I was like, yeah, I love to sing, you know, I love to travel. And Johnny was more like, well, we need to, you know, set goals, we need to, you know, and I respect that too. And so in a way we complement each other pretty well. But it's just, I'm illustrating the difference. Like, a lot of people are more ambitious than me. And I'm a little more like, I don't know, let's see what's happening today.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. And not that I don't have vision and have had stretches of sort of, you know, wanting to pursue an ambition or an ambitious goal, for sure. I mean, I know it takes some, you know, follow through to make things happen, but your question about, caring about the product and stuff. I think once I get involved and get personally invested in something, it's like, then I can't help but care, you know, and like it really doesn't matter to me what the music is or where the person's skill sets are, so to speak, if they're really great or if they're just okay. If I can see that their heart is in it and they're passionate about something, that it's just like the personal fulfillment thing is there, that's what I key into. And you know, and a lot of the people I work with, it's about that for them. It's really, and so it ends up being better than they would have expected, because then they have this extra help, you know, because I kind of do have quality standards, I guess I'd say. You know, at some point, I mean, I might politely, you know, direct them towards something like, hey, it's not happening today, you know, I don't feel it, but I know it can come out. How about we try this again tomorrow? That kind of suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really appreciated by people who want the best. It's not oftentimes what you want to hear or what you're expecting, but it needs to be said. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a lot of the things that we're just kind of talking about, it kind of dovetails into the question I always ask everybody, and it's what do you think is your most admirable trait or characteristic, and what do you think is your least admirable trait or characteristic, or something you'd like to improve?
Yeah. Well, in reverse order, the least one is a tendency to waste time, be a procrastinate. You know, to maybe have good intentions, but you know, there's kind of a lot to be said about that.
That's good to hear, because I feel like you've accomplished a lot, and I feel like I'm a procrastinator too, and it's like, oh, I haven't accomplished a lot. So hearing it from you is like, all right.
Good. Yeah. I mean, it's an ongoing, you know, awareness to work with, because, you know, a lot of times I'll, I try to do with what I ideally want to be able to do is, you know, you've heard the motto, you know, like, basically, I think it's a motto or an axiom of like, you know, basically promise, you know, by a certain point, but shoot for, you know, sooner. Yeah. You know, and you know, like quote them higher, but try to get it under, kind of thing, as far as cost and stuff. And practically speaking, it doesn't really pan out that way, but it's a good guy on the whole. But it's a good thing to kind of an ethic to live by. You know, and that way I can keep in communication with clients and prevent, you know, disastrous disappointments and stuff. But yeah, that's been, you know, just not just in my business, but like just in my whole life, you know, the rest of the other aspects of my life, like even just being a homeowner, you know, there's just so many parts of the house, my house, the home, that I'm just like, when am I going to get to that one thing that I've had this inspiration about years ago, you know? So on and on like that. The garden's a good example. I really want a greenhouse.
Oh, nice.
And I kept thinking, well, I'll just start small. And like even this winter, I was going to plant some stuff in pots and just have it here in the sunlight. And I still could. It's still winter out there. Right. It's probably a perfect time. But yeah, that's definitely one of them. And I have gotten myself into some, challenging relational things with, people kind of wishing that things had gone quicker, clients and stuff. So I'm learning. Yeah. Like for example, as a solo business guy, I got to learn how to pace and not take on more than I can handle, for one thing, and also plan ahead for when there aren't people calling for, And so the navigating the ups and downs of self-employment has been a fun little dance, interesting dance. And and as far as like the positive, I just think that in sort of a musical terms, my ability to sing harmonies and to harmonize musically with other people. I mean, that's one of my gifts, Yeah. Yeah, and I love it. I mean, it's just come naturally, and I'll forever love to sort of be Garfunkel to someone's Simon, At the same time, that's not the only place I want to be, of course, musically. And I enjoy, I don't want to be boxed in, so I enjoy branching out from that a lot. And then translate that into studio work and producing with others. Again, it's just the ability to be more collaborative than dictatorial or directive,
Nice, yeah.
Yeah, I try to find out, what people are, where they're at emotionally, and try to help them feel at ease, and try to kind of establish like a connection, and then nurture a relationship, because that's really what we're doing, is spending multitudes of hours working together on their most sacred thing. Yeah. So I want to be, I say a little prayer before anyone walks in the door, and every day, just to try to be aligned with that intention,
Nice.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to share that little prayer? Or?
It's just basically, it's like, it can just be in my head, but it's just basically, God make me, help me be of service to, service-minded here today. It can be really quick, just so I'm remembering that I'm being intentional, and I've got the on switch on, and I'm not sleeping in my own, personal world when they're in.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna probably co-opt that to my intentionality as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because even when I don't feel like that, like I'll wake up some days and just be like, I've got no go-go juice or motivation. Once I'm able to do that and then get into it, like I get into stuff way quicker. Yeah. And then sort of like fears and worries and concerns just kind of dissipate, and the joy of working with somebody else like just magnifies. It just kind of comes alive. And I've gotten feedback from people saying how nervous they were at first or something to, sit down and, oh my God, microphones, oh my God, the pressure of recording, and oh my God, I thought I had to have this. I thought I practiced this enough. It was supposed to, I was supposed to be ready, and it's just like, all that kind of settles down when they know they've got someone on their side through the process,
Yeah,
and it helps me because I don't like to deal with, too much anxiety. I've had people break down in tears before, and, the thing to do then is realize it's, something's going on inside. There's emotions, and, some of their music is maybe triggering, and they're not quite done with emoting about it, and so you just make the space. Sometimes just sit and wait, sometimes be a friend, and whatever. And, I don't know, it just, that kind of thing is, I don't know, it's just, that's part of life, it's not all about getting a product.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really cool. You mentioned your harmonizing talent, and I think listening to your solo album and listening to you at different things, like I love hearing your voice, and especially like lyrically, you're extremely talented, I think. And I was looking through some bio stuff and about you, and how you're multi-instrumental in all the instruments you play. I also saw, did you start out on trumpet in high school then? Okay, so that's what started it all.
It did, yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite instrument?
Probably voice.
Okay.
Yeah, if I really think about it. I mean, if, like right off the top of my head, singing is, it doesn't, because it's so you know, the visceral and resonant, experiential, you know. Yeah, probably my voice is my favorite. And then, you know, I love to play piano. That was my very first sort of music-making creative instrument.
Okay.
You know, and that's when I started singing. Was, in fact, Story Hill used to be called Chris and Johnny back in our high school days at Bozeman High, and long before Hawks Night Live was something they called Candlelight Dinner, or the Candlelight Music Night, and that was in the cafeteria where all the parents were invited in, and people in the choirs were, you know, given a chance to sing one song. And there'd be candles up and some, you know, terrible PA, maybe like a PV or something, whatever they could find. And Johnny and I were in choirs together, and he and I were the first that we knew of to do our own original, perform our own original songs. You know, everybody else was doing like, you know, Seven Bridges Road or Here Comes the Sun or something. And all that was good, but we wanted to, you know, yeah, we were probably about 16 at that time, you know, sophomores or something. And the kind of sort of feeling that we got from doing that was more electric, you know, like people were really like, wow, you know, something. There was like a surge of like something, admiration, just like, you guys did great, you know, you wrote that and sang, you know, that, yeah. And I played piano for that little stretch of the first couple of years.
Nice.
But you can't carry a piano around, and
electric, I suppose.
Johnny was like, why don't you learn guitar? Okay, I'll try.
That's really how it happened. I was just like, you should learn guitar.
Yeah, he started learning guitar at church camp. It's called Christicon. In the summertime, I remember his, you know, friend, mentor that taught him the first handful of chords. And then he came back after summer, and he was singing original songs along with other ones. But and it was like, because he was a violin, like, kind of a great violin player, you know, one of those first chair kind of guys. I think he was, or second. And but the guitar came naturally to him. And then I spent the summer at my church camp. I was working there, so I had a 12-string. A friend of my parents, I don't know, they just bought me a 12-string, which are the hardest things to learn on. So I was like fisting these like giant G chords, and you know, I could only play like 3 or 4 because you can't bar a chord on those. You know, they're really hard. But then by the time I got to 6, it was like, oh, this is easier. Yeah.
Why did I start with this?
Yeah. This is great. And yeah, so the guitar, I love to play it, but I've always used the guitar more for, you know, carrying a song. You know, and there's a big distinction in my mind between players and singer-songwriters, you know. You know, and how much, like a singer-songwriter can kind of decide for themselves to what extent they want to incorporate their, you know, an auxiliary instrument besides their lyrics and voice. To me, the main thing is you write a song and you sing it, and you find a way to, you know, to a vehicle like a guitar or a piano to deliver it. Yeah. A cappella singing is pretty boring. But add some nice guitar and stuff, that works.
That's an interesting process. I like that. With the original songs that you've made, is there one in particular that you're kind of most satisfied with, or is most meaningful to you?
Well, there's one that is that I recognize as being the most meaningful to. I guess it's meaningful to me, but it's like it has the biggest life of its own. And it's one that seems to be like kind of the Story Hill anthem in a lot of ways. It's like it's kind of requested for ever since we played it, which is, I think it's, and recorded it in the mid-90s, it's called Steady On. And it's got this uplifting message, and it also musically, it moves to a crescendo, like this sort of bridge over troubled water kind of, level of rise, and then it just soars at the end, right? Literally, the image is geese flying in formation, chevron formation, V formation, and it's in the lyrics are really hopeful. They're about sort of self-empowerment or acceptance and stuff, and so it seems like all across our concert history, and then just no matter what we've done, sort of as the changes we've kind of gone. We went from sort of folk or even Christian-y folk to more singer-songwriter, urban, and into maybe more I don't know, just refined folk in some ways. But like that song has sort of stayed as a mainstay. Like even if we don't include it in the set, it gets done at the end of the night.
Nice.
Yeah, and it appeals to people of all ages, you know. So it's one of those that kind of has like no class distinction or age whatever. It just works.
Yeah, anybody can connect with it.
Yeah. So I mean, but as far as my own like favorite songs, there might be another little category for me. Yeah.
I'm curious if I think Kyle runs into this with his song making too every now and then, where he will create a song which he really loves, and it just doesn't get the response from other people. Yeah. And I'm wondering if there's maybe one in particular that you're just like, this song I love and I think is so great, and it didn't perform, I guess, as expected when you brought it out to the world.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of those that don't even leave the living room, because I'm still waiting for my wife to cheer or something. I don't know. Don't you love this song? It's my favorite mellow, song that I've ever written. I can sing it like at whisper level, and it still rocks. And that's why I like it. But yeah, there's a few. And I tacked one of them onto the end of my latest solo EP. Mm-hmm. And I attempted to. I don't know that it turned out that it was my best performance of it, but it's really just simple guitar and simple lyric, a lot of imagery and stuff like that. That isn't like sort of like hooky or. It's not in some kind of, it just originated, and it's on its own. And that's the kind of songs that they come from somewhere else for me. And it's like, wow, I feel kind of lucky to whatever, gotten this thing. Yeah.
What song title is that?
The one which one am I referring to? The one that's recorded?
Yeah.
Spanish Dove.
Spanish Dove.
Yeah. And I wrote that my first year out of high school. I was living in Spain.
Right.
Studying in 89. Spain in '89, yeah. And that's why I wrote Spanish Dove, quote, parentheses, circa 89. Cause it was somewhere there or 90, and I was writing a lot that year because, like I said, I had a lot of time in my youth or younger adult years. You'd go to, like life in Spain, we were talking about getting rest and stuff. I mean, you had siesta. Everybody had siesta for 2 hours, 3 hours in the afternoon, and sit around with a guitar. Yeah. And the world was pretty quiet, and then my responsibilities were just like studying and getting to class the next day. Somebody else was. I hooked up with a friend, and we shared an apartment, and we're friends to this day. He loved to cook, and I loved to play guitar, and he loved to listen. And I mean, we would still be roomies today if things were different, and he's a pro chef now, and just like me, he's self-employed, does his own catering, and lives in Austin, which is his music capital. Well, that's where he's from, but
Yeah.
And anyway, and so he was a great source of encouragement,
Nice.
and was just always like cooking food and putting stuff on the table while I was sitting at the table playing.
That's great.
Uh-huh.
Who do you think has been the most influential person in your life?
Well, I mean, as far as musically, if that's what we're talking about.
We can say musically, and we can say period.
Well, okay, so the music one is Johnny Hermanson.
Okay.
Yeah, because I wouldn't be where I'm at if I hadn't, like Bermuda Triangled into some kind of relationship with Johnny. And he was the first one to sort of call me out and say, that's great, original song. I didn't even know. My first songwriting was more like just little prayers and things for myself and stuff. And prior to that, it was like learning. Like I said, I used to play piano a lot just to kind of calm down at the end of the day. I'd go down to my parents' house. I was living with my parents. I'd go down to their basement and basically meditate on the piano and sing. Like I started to open up songbooks by Joni Mitchell and Jim Croce and people that I was hearing. My parents would play their records and stuff, and I liked melody and ballads, and so I could play those. And I started learning other people's songs, and but then I started like sort of writing my own, and like I said, Johnny I remember visiting his house, his parents' house on South 3rd, over by campus, and playing this song. He was like, I'd really like to hear your song. And we were just sitting on his front porch, or their front porch, and I played it real, like, shy. And he's like, God, yeah, you wrote that? That's great. Do you mind if I try singing along with it? And that's when it started. And then pretty soon there were like neighborhood kids like gathering around, from across the street and stuff. Pretty soon time stood still, and we were just like making music, and so then we kept doing it, like on our own volition. We were like, let's do it again. And so we made our first recording of original songs together one winter in like 1987 or something. Like we were freshmen, sophomores, something like that, with like a Fostex 4-tracker down in his parents' basement, making like reverb effects through the Fender amp and stuff, and and a lot of the songs were really, they didn't have a lot of form, or they just had these very sort of ethereal lyrics and stuff, but it was our thing. Yeah. So he was the first one to encourage me to, I didn't know it at the time, but to become a singer-songwriter, an active one. And then he was the first one to book our first gig. Our first public appearance was at this coffee shop. What was it called? It used to be on campus, actually, over where Town and Country is now. And this was a long time ago.
There wasn't a different Leaf and Bean, was it?
No. And I mean, given a chance, I can see the poster, because one of our friends, in my mind, one of our friends like made an 8.5 by 11 caricatures of us, Chris and Johnny, $5. I don't know if it said cover or donation or something. But we packed the house, and we only had enough for like half a set, and then the rest were like John Denver and U2 covers, but we got encored, and I was scared out of my mind. I can barely remember it. I was such an introvert and totally like afraid of people listening, and yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite song that that's not yours?
A bunch. I have a favorite handful of artists that I would say.
Nope, doesn't count.
Uh-huh.
Favorite song. Favorite
Favorite song?
Yeah.
I gotta say I love Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Okay.
Because it's like a hymn to me. It's like a gospel song. It's like there's an energy to that, and not too many people can sing it. In fact, in my mind, it's just Garfunkel,
Wow.
which is kind of amazing that Simon wrote it, Garfunkel sings it, but apart from that, it's just the feeling of it. It's like it's such good medicine, you know. Like it's like it's like how I want to. I wish more music was like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's just really healing. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Compassionate song. Mm-hmm.
And back to, who do you think has been the biggest influence on your life outside of music?
And apart from my wife, right?
Yep.
And parents.
Actually, no, not apart from them.
Oh.
That's the last question. So you can absolutely nominate.
Yeah.
Well, not nominate, but you can absolutely answer with any of them.
Well, my wife. Leslie, yeah. Leslie Rickard turned Cunningham. Yeah, she keeps me, you know, going sort of straight down a path, you know, as far as like having some kind of inspiration for improving and growing, you know, and handling adversity, and, you know, I mean, there's just so much to be said about, you know, my feeling lucky or fortunate to, you know, to have the gift of her commitment, and just, you know, it's not always easy, of course, for her or me, but, you know, the marriage path with her has been, you know, I couldn't imagine my life without doing that. You know, for the most part, she's really brought out the best in me and supported, and I hope to think, I mean, yeah, it's mutual. Like, I think that was one of the big things that brought us together, was like, well, what inspires you? Well, what inspires you? Well, let's talk more about that, you know, and like kind of just support it. And so now when I first met her, she was unhappy in her profession and in her job, although she was doing good work. She was a social worker, but she really wanted more personal fulfillment and direct personal interaction. And I'd never heard of this field, but it was coming out. It's called coaching, and she went and became trained. And she continues her training as a coach. And so she's sort of in this sort of like helping leaders be better leaders, through inspiration and sort of principle-based approaches, not numbers,
right,
as much.
And now she uses that with you.
Well, I think it sort of through osmosis. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she does. She's an inspiration that way, for sure. And it's so good for our son, because she's always thinking of ways to, you know, kind of think ahead to help him find, you know, his path too.
Chris, of everything that you do with producing, playing, do you still ski?
I would love to ski. Yeah, not much.
With everything that you do in your life, you know, being a father, being a husband, music, producing, what's your favorite thing to do?
I still still love to sing and play, but really it's tied or probably eclipsed by being a father. Mm-hmm. And a parent with my wife, with him. I mean, those joys just seem to keep escalating. I don't know why, or if that's just normal. Natural. Because I think what's happening for me is that there's a bit of a priority shift. I remember my dad saying, his list of priorities for himself were, well, to put it his way, it's like, Chris, you should ask yourself the following questions, like, where do you want to live? What do you want to do? Who do you want to live with? And kind of like put them in the order that feels right. And, I was all over the map for a long time. Like after high school, all I wanted to do was travel. So I went to Spain and then another foreign country called Minnesota. And then I hit the road for 5 years and just crisscrossed the country with Johnny for, in a Dodge minivan, caravan. And so I got to see a lot of the States. And I got to spend some time in Pittsburgh or near there doing some volunteer construction and made a little community there. And then I got to go live in Seattle for like almost a year. But then I came back to visit Bozeman, and my sort of running joke is I'm still here visiting, because that was like close to 20 years ago. Actually, it was 20 years ago. And so I've started a new life. And so when I hit Bozeman, I was like, felt like I was home again, Mm-hmm. My soul just like went to rest here. It rested. And I was ready in my, to sort of establish roots and kind of, do something that wasn't so tied to motion, being in a different place every day. And being so tied to one other person, with in a musical duo. And like I mentioned earlier, that difference, Johnny was very driven. So in order to kind of keep up with them, I had to sort of ignore a lot of my natural instincts. And I started craving community and, other relationships and stuff. And, so anyway, and then, when I met Leslie, it was like who I wanted to live with. And, I still wanted to do music, but I could kind of put that third, And then the way around that was, well, maybe if you build a recording studio, you could keep being musical. So that's been the sort of substitute, which has turned into more of a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now I like to branch out from the studio and go play at Bozeman Hot Springs or Ted's or... I get calls to go play house concerts around the area, and someone just called from North Carolina, and that would be my second time being flown out to their house concert.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And someone in Boise just called, and they're like, "Can we fly you out?" And I'm like, "Well, let's figure out a time. I got to work around, school schedule." Stuff like that. But yeah, yeah. I can't remember exactly what the question was.
Oh, it was just what's your favorite thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next question after that is what accomplishment are you most proud of?
Oh gosh. One of the things I wrote down when you sent me the list of questions, there's kind of like 2 or 3 that tied in terms of music, but probably the best thing was with Story Hill getting to get on a Prairie Home Companion, and getting that, repeated invitations to play on the show, for one, and then getting invited onto their, they did these cruises, these cruise ships with, Prairie Home Companion cruise ships, and the first one was great. But the second one was amazing. It was in the Bahamas. And I got to take, my wife and son and Johnny and his wife, and then both sets of our parents bought tickets. And so, spending 8 days on the seas and I grew up with, his folks too. I spent a lot of time with them. So we'd have dinner every night, and I just love being on the water. So it was like the best package, for me, like sunshine, play music, couldn't ask for more. It was great.
That's awesome.
I don't know if that's an accomplishment or just some fun thing that
Yeah, being good enough to
Yeah.
To be invited and play on that, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That's great. You said it was tied with 2 other things other than Prairie Home?
Well,
or?
I'd say raising, being a father, being a parent is the other one. And the getting invited onto 11th and Grant was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that seems like it was a cool experience.
It was really cool, and getting to play with, I was really honored to do it, and yet, like, to get the invitation direct from Eric, and but I also knew that, like, I would probably be too freaked out to just do it solo. So it was an opportunity to ask a few other friends if they'd, and 2 of them I knew for a long time, but one, I ended up with a band. So putting together a little string band was like so cool.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
What's something about you that most people wouldn't know?
Well, I was gonna say I used to have a really strong interest in something that most people don't know about, but crop circles. Have you heard of those?
Yes. Go on.
Okay. So when I was living in Seattle, I was taking a year off, anyway, I was, I had decided to stop touring and being with, Johnny and I had kind of mutually arrived at, like, okay, that was a great 5 years, and I was burned out. Mm-hmm. And I was still, like, kind of searching, like, spiritually or whatever, and I figured I'd find something in Seattle, I don't know. And I spent quite a bit of time just, like, soaking in the offerings of different things there. And when I started, like, I don't know, going to lectures or work, anyway, when I stumbled on what the heck are crop circles, I got really, like, intrigued, and I started studying as much as I could. This is kind of early internet days, so there were crop circle enthusiasts, especially over in the UK, because that's where most of them were appearing, the longer growing season there, and the more open-minded English culture. They were really, first of all, they were everywhere in England, especially in the UK, all those islands. But there were people that were, like, really, really, like, documenting them and trying to figure out what was going on, and theorizing and stuff, and updating. Like, there were people that were self-funded pilots, who, once they were spotted, they'd fly over and photograph, and then upload those and do what they could to document the data and stuff. But I got into it in more of, like, a spiritual way. I was like, wow, what, how, who, what, and it really led to a lot of inspiration for me at that time in my life. I felt like this connection to something, greater, and like, we are not alone kind of thing, something benevolent. I felt this, that they were signs, and that they were something, positive in it, with in intention, for the most part. Yeah. So.
How do you feel about them now?
I feel like they were a big part of my, awakening or whatever, early awakening, spiritual awakening. Yeah, to that connection that again, like, we're not alone, and maybe we are one kind of feeling, and there's something active in this, in what we call our universe, so, I've never been one to get tripped up or stumble on the ones that are human-made, just because to me it's just so clear, the difference between something that's basically smashed down with crude instrument boards and ropes and stuff, jokes and hoax. Yeah. and the difference between those and like ones that are created within 30 seconds that are half a mile long and perfect geometric shapes, and where the crop is still alive, living, and stays that way, and they can be in the most recognizable symbols, religious symbols, mathematical. I mean, the breadth and scope of the actual designs, some of them far exceed our science, and our math, or they point to higher levels of math and science and stuff, and like I said, religious and spiritual symbols. So there's just such a treasure trove of inspiration in learning about, and then just looking at them. They usually have a vibe to them. It's just so cool. So I don't know. I used to actually want to take it a step further and become one of those sort of crop circle enthusiasts and put together slideshows and like run around whoever would listen and deliver lectures or whatever, just to kind of be a part of it. And I was getting close. I don't know, I was getting not totally set up for it, but I was steeped in it,
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then I come here and like nobody cares. And so it's like, well, okay, what else should I do? Oh, maybe I'll play a wedding.
Crop circles or wedding?
Wedding singer,
okay.
And worked at Saks, Thrift Avenue for my third time, Yeah. What's interesting is like the leading theory about the crop circles and how they're created is actually not some kind of, they're actually, and there's some video out there, I guess, or at least eyewitnessing of these, what they call BOLs, balls of light, about football shape. They just sort of appear, and they, a few or one or two or three or four, whatever it takes. They move pretty quick, usually at night when no one's looking, usually, and they zoom around a field pretty quick, and basically using kind of a microwave energy that loosens up the crop. You speak of water, crop is full of water, so sort of irradiates it enough to be pliable and kind of loose, and then somehow they organize it with like a push, a wind or something, and into the shapes, and then disappear, So that's why no one sees like tracks coming in or broken stalks on the, authentic ones, and it's like overnight. In other words, farmer went to bed, woke up next morning, and suddenly there's like this big giant design, and it's not like some like insect skeletal alien thing with a big craft,
Right. Yeah. It's less physical.
Yeah, less, and they're so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you had a major failure in your life that you can think of?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't look at life like that. I kind of, it's not that I want to sound like philosophical or anything. I'm sure there's been times when I felt like that, but I guess I just don't dwell on anything that feels like failure or like a stuck regret or anything. I'm sure there's still things that I wish I'd done different and or said different, but yeah, so far no. I mean, there's definitely some things. I remember like growing up when I was playing with fire and a blowtorch actually, and and my friend and I were like, oh, the parents are gone. We're like putting like kerosene on a skateboard and lighting on fire and doing some like tricks and stuff, or just horsing around. It's all innocent fun, but then we were carving our names with the blowtorch in my dad's wood pile in the back, and then we were off to watch Monty Python up at his house, and those carvings in the woodpile smoldered, and next thing I know, his stepdad's like walks down the stairs, and he's like, oh, Monty Python, that's a funny movie. Hey, Chris, your house is on fire. I'm like, You're funny too. And, no, I'm serious. There's like fire trucks down the street. You better go. And so I had to call my parents, and that was the heaviest phone ever. Like, they're out of town. I'm calling my dad. Dad, it's okay. Nothing quite burned down, but, you know, here's what happened. That was like a failure. It was like a big regret.
Yeah.
And then he turned it around, and people would ask him, hey, you know, what happened to your house? You know, was it your son? He'd be like, yeah, it was arson. It was arson. So, you know, he forgave me after a week or two of, don't go play with that kid anymore, and don't touch my blowtorch.
Did you tell him right away? Were you like, it was me and we were playing?
Oh,
This is
yeah.
what happened? Okay.
Yeah, no. And the babysitter was there, and I guess she wasn't watching. Maybe that's her big failure.
Maybe that's her failure. That's awesome. What a great story.
Yeah, but thankfully everything worked out.
What do you see in your future?
Yeah. Well, what I see or what I want to see, I guess that can be the same thing. I'd like to see, you know, improvements with my studio, like in terms of sort of equipment, and because I'm kind of a self-taught, self-trained with plenty of mentorship, but there's some, you know, gear stuff that, you know, I would love to improve upon. It's been long enough that, you know, it's getting near time. So a new sort of phase with my production work would be great. And, you know, maybe attracting more sort of ideal, the kinds of clients that the projects I like to work on the most are singer-songwriters like myself, doing those. I mean, I've done plenty, and I love it. But then balancing out the work life with the studio life with more new music. Mm-hmm. You know, it's high time for a new, fresh go at writing and performing, and I'm not sure how that's going to look, but it could include sort of a mix of Story Hill, solo stuff, and maybe band stuff, you know, and a little more touring. Yeah. And then at my age, I'm like looking at getting more into just health in general. So I really, maybe it was like 10 years ago or something, I took a class in Qigong. Mm-hmm. And loved it. And then just last year I did it again. I was like, God, I love this stuff. So I've been trying to, and there's only one Qigong instructor in town that I know of, and he just does them seasonally, mm-hmm. which is great, but it's like I want to be more involved in sort of a healing arts, martial art thing, nice. You know, something that's sort of self-discipline, but that and herbs and nutrition, my wife and I are pretty into, you know, just doing what's best for, like we have a son with asthma and all these allergies and stuff, so we're constantly looking for ways to help him alleviate a lot of, you know, his environmental stresses. And then just for our own selves, like, yeah, it's fun to learn more about what kinds of herbs you take during which seasons and stuff. Yeah. So, yeah. And, you know, I don't know if that'll lead to other career opportunities or not, but I'm kind of open to it.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to just be music or studio work.
Nice. You mentioned some health things.
Yeah. Well, I feel super lucky and you know, like I got led to an opportunity that maybe a lot of people don't get. I'm pretty young, you know, for people to have like a cancer scare kind of thing. And when I think about the lifestyle I was leading, it kind of makes sense. Over time, I was sort of a junk food junkie for years on the road, and then even up, just have been. I mean, just fast food and like, just diet stuff that just was like really kind of toxic over time, and but anyway, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, which kind of runs in the family, but also from what I understand, I've heard that genetics can play a role, but also it can just anyone can have that happen,
right.
And I didn't know anything about it a little over a year ago, and what happened was I was in a car wreck, my son and I, and that led to a visit to my general practitioner, and my wife suggested, why don't you get your blood tested too, and you're not too young, why don't you have your PSA checked, which is a prostate indicator. Anyway, I'm like, what's that? PSA? Okay, sure. And then the funny thing is, my doctor forgot, and so I had to like remind him. And he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure. I just thought you were too young, but whatever." Yeah, we'll do it. Anyway, it lucked out, and then he saw the number. He's like, "Oh, you better go to so and so, and they will know what to do next." And that led to further testing, a little unpleasant to describe, but. And that led to a diagnosis, which was the scariest, or just the most depressing kind of, few seconds of processing that I've had to deal with, as far as like somebody sitting across from me with a computer screen and a white, coat, explaining, the bad news to me, of my bad news, but for him, it was like, and the good news is we can take care of this, We got knives, we got lasers, we got all kinds of stuff. Actually, he's like, this is it's kind of borderline, we caught it just in time, but we do recommend, treatment. And I was just like, okay. So I felt really, afraid and tons of fear, and just like, oh shit. Just like, wow, what's this, and I got really depressed for a little while, a couple months. But what I did get too was really in touch with my feelings about the whole thing, and in that process was able to kind of open up to some people. And I was starting to be like, I really, if there's any way that I could get this taken care of in some other way, that's not as invasive. I just didn't feel like I wanted to do either of the conventional options, and they both sounded just really unappealing. Yeah. So the quick of it is that, sort of like 6 degrees of separation. I talked to, I was, the car wreck led to chiropractic, real open-minded chiropractor guy. I shared, he's a guy, he knows about, health and medical stuff. And so I'm sharing this with him. He's like, well, if he agreed with me, if you can find any other way. So there was some reinforcement there. Meanwhile, I'm not telling anyone except my wife. I'm just like, let's keep this. I didn't want to worry my parents or even get them involved. Just was being very deliberate, and because I didn't know the answer yet. And the chiropractor led me to a massage therapist, medical massage, who again was very open-minded, and she's really aware of all the options in the medical community that aren't necessarily like, I'd never heard of what a naturopath does or is. And so at some point, I'm just like laying on the massage table, and we're talking like spine damage and, quite a bit of tissue stuff from whiplash.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I was in the ER with 5 stitches and like a swollen eye, like a shut eye. Yeah, it was look a lot better this year. But it was traumatic. Near blackout. And it wasn't even. It was just the woman behind me, the car behind us, and we were just starting to go out onto a road, and we just got rammed with this giant truck, and then she accelerated instead of stopping. And it was just the weirdest thing. It was up at Bridger.
Wow.
So it's been over a year. I'm thankful to be alive, but still kind of like dealing with legal stuff with that, because the insurance kind of they wanted to, settle it really early.
Right.
I'm like, that's not right. I'm not back to normal. I'm not whole. Yeah. Anyway, the massage therapist led me to a particular a naturopath who has this non-FDA approved method of curing. And he said, the thing that stood out was, and she said it, she's like, yeah, no, he cures cancer. And I'm like, what? I didn't know it was curable. Like, okay. Have you heard of him? No. Well, he's actually just over here, just like 2 blocks away. And I'm like, great. Well, yeah, I mean, I'd be interested. And she's like, well, he's 3 to 6 months out, but I can give you my appointment. It's next week. And so that was the way to get in.
Wow.
Was, you get gifted in someone else's appointment. And I've noticed that's the whole culture with his practice, is because now I've done that for others. He says he has a 97, he says 100%, but 97, 98% cure rate, which is like a whole different languaging than anything you'd get in a hospital. Yeah. They say stuff like, we can cut it out or we can irradiate it or whatever, and then you'll have like a 5-year to 10-year remission or something. I can't remember the terms they use. They don't talk about curing, and he just flat out, the language is very simple. I'll cure it, and it's kind of his confidence and his sort of, I don't know. It's like you either take it or leave it. And I'm like, well, this is what I'm praying for. This is what I'm looking for. Yeah. It's like, that's ringing true for me. So
solving the problem forever. Yeah. I'll take that one.
I'll go that way. Yeah. So then I started to get hopeful, and I got in to see him, and right away the 3-step plan was radically change your diet, do this. He gave me a 1-page, like you're going green, you're alkalizing your body, your biological environment. Cancer can't grow in an alkaline environment, so only acidic. It feeds on sugars and acids. Mm-hmm. I guess and I was drinking like a diet Dr. Pepper a day, and just like all this junk food. So I stopped all the toxicity. We got into, herbs, a Kangen water machine, which is a way of alkalizing your water, raising the pH level. So your body's at like 7, and if you drink, ours is set to 9.5. So it really changes the environment within your body, within your cells, and there's more to be said about the Kangen water, but and then just really no sugars, no carbs and stuff, just a real strict diet for a while, and then vitamin C, high concentration to weaken the cancer cells. And then the silver bullet are these non-FDA approved injections of a certain kind of chemical compound that this woman scientist, lab woman, created and patented back in the 90s or something. And and it's proved 100% effective in animal studies, lab rats studies, but there's no human clinical studies because the, medical, whatever you call it, is just too, they just squash all efforts to do it. So, not that I dwell too much on the whole sort of socio-political side of it, but it was clear to me that, there's a lot of resistance to, and so the guy I worked with doesn't actually diagnose, he knows you have it, but he for the coding he puts in is like, I'm treating him for insomnia or lack of energy, the codes for the insurance, and the cost is super low compared to, just a few visits at the hospital and stuff. So I just felt like I was led to it and super lucky. And when I got the latest blood analyses back, they were all like, "You're looking good." He considered me cured, which scared the other doctors, but he's like, "Oh, they said he should never say that," but that's what he said.
Yeah.
And I feel good, and I didn't feel good then.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy. That's amazing.
It's a story, and I've been able to share that story, and have since connected with a guy with even worse shape than me in Colorado who's come up. He's been looking. He's a medically trained guy, and had heard about that particular treatment and read about it, but didn't think anyone in the U.S. practiced it, and didn't know any. And here it is in our town, and and so when I mentioned what it was on the phone, he said basically drop the phone and talk to his wife, because I heard it. He's like disappeared for a sec. He's like, "I think I found it," And he's been looking for like 2-3 years and flying all over the country doing these other alternative treatments. And like I said, he's worse off than me. So he came up last month to stay with us. I took him to his first appointment, so he's in. So now he's got hope, and he's on that treatment path too. So I don't know. It actually went pretty easy, all things told. But we'll see. I mean, one day at a time. But yeah.
God, that's amazing. Well, are you ready for the very last question of the interview?
So I am. So I'll be,
okay,
making it up.
All right, good, perfect. So who's somebody who's a part of your life who who you admire? What do you admire about them, and what's 1 or 2 questions that you would like to ask them?
Okay. Okay. I think I know what I would ask them. It's funny because so the person I'm thinking of, I've got admiration for and curiosity for.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what makes this person go and for so long?
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't know. It's just that I'd love to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to, I guess, just be someone that I'm kind of surprising myself. Like your question gave me an opportunity to see what I would come up with, what would basically pop into my head, and it wasn't necessarily what I would expect.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of a man named Wagner.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard of him. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, he hails from the East. He's a New Yorker, I think, because a lot of his stories are, life in Manhattan, and his early days of. And he's a minister. Mm-hmm. Locally here in Bozeman at Pilgrim Congregational, and I mean, I've appreciated him for going on maybe 2 decades, and maybe got to know him, I guess, somewhat personally along the way, but it's hard to say. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just know I've always been like both comfortable around him and sort of like slightly like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Kind of terrified, not terrified, but just like, wow. How does someone get sort of that kind of perspective and live in their head to that sort of. He's pretty heady as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
He's kind of known to be an intellectual, bookish kind of person. Yeah, and yet shows up like week after week with these sort of, it's not like you have to be inspiring or spot on or profound every time, but just he's both himself and those things consistently. And sometimes you're just like, how does he? Where did those gifts come from? And so my question would be like, when did he recognize that he wanted to pursue, ministry as a path, as a career path, which is pretty kind of uncharted waters.
Yeah.
Or it's pretty. It's kind of like with music, you never really. It's a windy road, and then he, it's basically like answering a calling kind of thing. That's intriguing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what keeps him balanced? So that he can keep showing up, because for so many people, it's like his, especially when you add it up over the years, it's like, and he's probably reaching a time when he could be wrapping things up if he wanted to or something, but something just keeps him going, I think. And I'm guessing that he would, credit a lot with his wife, Mary, because she is sort of like his other half, like literally they run that church really and have for years. Yeah, it's cool. But they're just so approachable, and so like so many people like are just comfortable around them, and sometimes it's easy for me to forget that I'm actually being given a service by him.
Nice.
It's a gift to get to be in the audience and spend an hour, basically being affected by someone else's sort of take on things and message. And so it's a lot like maybe admiration for, that I have for some musicians too, or songwriters especially, where I feel like there's, like a message-driven intent behind their music.
Nice.
And I relate to it because I wouldn't be in music if there, with Story Hill or solo otherwise, if there weren't that coming through with music anyway, because, some people everybody has different gifts, and mine isn't like an amazing musician per se. Like there's a big difference between someone like a Jake Fleming, a Craig Hall, and Eric Funk, who are basically masters of lots of instruments, I think, and can compose and create music that's like advanced, and there's like training in it behind it. And then there's me, who just basically I'm fortunate enough to like have enough of enough of an ability to sort of carry a tune, but then also it's like really what I'm doing is using that to deliver songs that hopefully connect, mean something to somebody else.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good nomination. I like it. Okay. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's someone you could probably, sit down and I don't know if he's an unsung hero, but he's the one that popped into my head. I think a lot of people would sing praises to him.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this project. I want to thank you for being so open-hearted, and for your humility, and for creating genuine and sincere art, and always supporting very unselfishly others who are doing the same. And I just want to wish you and your family nothing but the best.
All right. Well, Thank you
Yeah.
for this opportunity, Steve.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out episode number 15 of You Are Admirable with the very admirable Chris Cunningham. Chris is throwing a free concert this week, Thursday, June 28th. Check out the description for details about that. He's also crowdfunding his new album through Kickstarter. That Kickstarter ends Friday, June 29th. You should see a link to that in the description as well. Please consider supporting him by listening to his music, going to the free concert, supporting him on Kickstarter. Of course, you can support this project at patreon.com/youareadmirable. You can support by liking, sharing, subscribing, telling a friend. And of course, remember, you are admirable. We'll see you next time. And we're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that's good. Yeah.